Welcome to Crossroad Connection. We're speaking out for those left unheard. My name is David Scheringa. I'm the host of Crossroad Connection and the president of Crossroad Bible Institute. Have you ever thought what it would be like to have one of your own children in prison, but perhaps even in solitary confinement? Well, we're going to talk to someone who knows about this firsthand. Her name is Lois DeMott. Lois, welcome to the program. Lois is the director of a ministry, a pretty new ministry, correct, called Citizens for Prison Reform, a grassroots organization that supports, educates, and unifies family, friends, and citizens seeking reform of the criminal justice system. Well, I guess I hinted at it in the introduction there to you, but how did you get interested in criminal justice and starting up a ministry like this?
Yes, well, first of all, I want to say that Citizens for Prison Reform was founded back in 2011.
Okay.
And I was the president of that organization. We got our nonprofit status through Cooley Law School. And so I founded that, and that began in 2011. I recently just resigned as president of Citizens for Prison Reform to take over a new program that I received private funding for, the Family Participation Program.
The Family Participation Program?
Yes.
And this is something separate from Citizens for Prison Reform?
Yes, it is. Although we certainly dovetail together, we have many families that are involved, that will be involved in both. Citizens for Prison Reform still has monthly meetings that are held to support loved ones of prisoners and citizens as far as working to reform the system. So, a little about how I got into this work.
Right. And did I see Richard Reinstra's name?
Yes.
He's a good friend of our ministry.
Yes, Richard Reinstra is now the president of Citizens for Prison Reform. So
Okay.
He has taken on that role and will be working to move the organization forward in the coming months. So it's very exciting to have some new leadership so that I can move over and do the work that I feel I've been called to do with the Family Participation Program.
So the name of the ministry, it's another ministry, Family Participation Program.
Right.
Okay. Now tell us the backdrop. How did you get involved in this?
Well, I want to start with telling you that I used to be a person who thought you do the crime, you do the time.
Sure.
I knew,
Everybody kind of starts there, right?
I guess,
Yep.
And I think for myself, I probably never would have been moved just by hearing about the atrocities and the treatment and the things that are going on the inside of the system and the lack of
It wouldn't be on your radar.
rehabilitation.
Right.
Yes, so it really took me having to experience it, unfortunately, firsthand. And I often say it has been the pain and the anger turned into passion and purpose for me. So my son had just turned 15 by 2 months, and he was sent into the adult prison system here in Michigan. I had no clue that we send juveniles into the adult system.
Right. It's a rude awakening, isn't it?
Yes, and he had struggled with mental health challenges since he was very young. We had spent since the time he was 3 and 4 years old working to get him help. So it had been a lifelong struggle. He'd been sent out of state 3 times. He had known, mental illness. And so he was sent into the system. And that was my awakening at that point, was when I got in there and we saw other juveniles who were in there, many of whom had so little support. They didn't have any family involved.
Could you communicate with him at all when he was in solitary confinement to know what he was going through at the time, or did you find this out later?
Well, many of the things I think we didn't know or realize how difficult it was. We would certainly try to write. There's no phone calls that are allowed. That's
Right.
one of the privileges. So as you start getting tickets, you lose more and more privileges. And it's unfortunate, but those who have mental illness, who aren't getting the right treatment, who aren't on the right meds, or aren't getting the therapy and the assistance that they need, they're going to wind up with more and more tickets. That's just a fact.
Sure.
And so as they get more and more tickets, their outdoor time is taken away from them. Their phone time is taken away. Our visits were through glass. The number of visits are limited and shortened. and they are brought up and they're in shackles, so it's difficult for them to even hold onto the phone. So there were many things that we didn't know. His term that he spent in long-term segregation, as Michigan Department of Corrections calls it, or we call it solitary confinement, where they're in isolation. They're only out 3 times a week for a 10-minute shower is the amount of time that they are outside. That's the only contact that they have.
Wow, usually solitary confinement across the country has 23 hours and you get an hour out. This is 3 times out for, would you say 10 minutes?
10 minutes for showers.
For a week.
Right. Many people have been in there, some of them for years.
Right.
Some of them, and then some of them it's many months. Yes, some of them do get 1 hour out. So they get 1 hour out in a caged yard.
Yeah.
But often when they begin to break down and they continue to have problems, then they lose that.
They lose that.
Yes.
Now you just threw a lot of issues at us. We're talking about juveniles serving in adult prisons. We're talking about the mentally ill being incarcerated, which is a huge problem.
Right.
I think that started back in the 80s already, that they were starting to close mental facilities and starting to incarcerate people with mental illness. So a huge percentage of people that are in prison are there. We're talking about solitary confinement. Where do we go with this? What do you want to talk about? What can you help us with? Solitary confinement, juveniles in adult prisons, or the mentally ill being incarcerated?
Well, I'm working to address all of those things. For me, what really hit home was how alone we felt as a family, how we didn't know, we couldn't understand even the terminology that was used once you're inside the system. We didn't have access often to be able to communicate with the administration or the workers, because we didn't know that he had to sign a release of information authorizing and giving permission for them to speak with us. There were so many barriers as a mother that I felt, so many walls that were up high. And yes, there are some great people who work on the inside. We're thankful for those people that were helpful and that cared, and we could see that. But there's also a lot of them who feel that they're not being punished enough, and more heaped on punishment is the answer. So, after looking around and just seeing how alone all of these families were and how many more of them didn't know where to turn, didn't know where to get the resources, that was really what led me to organizing. And, I went out and I went to rallies and I met with other organizations and started organizing families. And that was how we created the organization Citizens for Prison Reform.
So your experience of not knowing what's going on with your son, feeling so isolated, feeling lost in the terminology and in the world of incarceration, that gave you the desire to help other families, to enlighten them on that world, and so they could navigate better. Is that correct?
Yes, that's exactly what Citizens for Prison Reform, what our whole mission was. Also to educate the general public, because what I knew was that I was the general public previously, and I had no clue.
Right.
And so for us to be able to go out and speak out, for me to be able to go and present to universities, to other organizations and communities, bringing awareness as to why we need to all care. We need to care because if we start providing rehabilitation for everyone in there, not just the mentally ill or the juveniles, but everyone should have the opportunity to be rehabilitated, to be provided programming. They're 95 to 98% are going to come back out, and they're going to be your neighbor or my neighbor. So, we should care because we're spending all this money incarcerating them. And if they're sitting with idle time on their hands, they don't have the opportunity for programming, for education, they're coming back out no better than what they went in.
Right.
And that's what really became real for me. I started to get it. I started to understand. and connecting of why it should matter to everyone in our communities. So, we started doing that work. We started going and bringing awareness to our legislators. We held legislative educational days, bringing families, their stories in and sharing. And so we did all of that work, and then we realized that families really needed a resource guide. They needed a guide. Michigan Department of Corrections at that time had nothing on their website that families could go to click on that would help them navigate. So we created a resource guide, and that is downloadable both on Citizens for Prison Reform website as well as the Family Participation Program website. That is a fabulous guide. If anybody is lost and they're not knowing what to do, the information is in there. It's an excellent tool of helping people, whether it's dealing with the mental illness program or medical, whatever it is. We have ways that they can advocate for their loved ones while they're inside.
Well, we've just started. We're going to take a little break right now, but when we come back, we want to jump into these extremely important issues that you have brought up. I had a telephone call just the other day from a couple whose son was arrested, and they were absolutely baffled with the system. Absolutely baffled. In this particular case, they said they talked. He was able to talk with his public defender for like 15 minutes.
Yes,
I mean, there are just
reality.
There are so many issues here,
yes.
And we'll be right back after this.
Stay connected to what's happening at Crossroad Bible Institute with Crossroad Network News. This free magazine is designed to keep you informed and inspired about what Christ Church is doing in prisons and jails. If you'd like a free subscription to Crossroad Network News, fill out the form online by visiting us at cbi.fm.
Welcome back to Crossroad Connection. My name is David Schuring. I have in the studio with me today Lois DeMott, and we're talking about something very near to her experience, to your experience, in terms of having a son mentally ill in solitary confinement. How long was he in solitary confinement?
He did 4 months during the one stint. And that was probably the worst 4 months of his time. He then was sent up to Marquette, where he did 9 months in solitary during another segment. And neither one of them were easy. But during that first time that he spent in solitary confinement, we saw him deteriorate. He was off from his medications, and deteriorate means obviously he became, his condition became worse and worse. And, I went for a visit. He had all of the visits he could have when he was in prison, never missed any of his visits, because we knew that that was what was going to keep his hope alive.
Sure, just some human contact.
And I learned unconditional love during all of this time. I stuck with him even when he was making a lot of mistakes and he wasn't well, and he continued to get tickets. I stuck with him. I felt like he needed somebody in his corner.
Sure.
And I saw so many prisoners who didn't have that, who had no support. But he wound up being restrained numerous times, hogtied, where he was in
solitary?
Correct.
Why would you have to be hogtied in solitary confinement?
If you're breaking things, and he had been having these rages since he was young. It's become clear to us now that he was never on the right medication. Took us 10 years to get the right medication. And to this day, it's hard for me to sleep because I know how many other people are still being treated exactly in that manner. Women and men who are being continuously hogtied, restrained, and gassed, chemicals used. And I really get concerned because I look at my son and I see him as an example of, when he was gotten into a new facility, doctors put him on a new medication that he'd never been tried on, and they got him out of the cell, and they started providing him programming, and they said, we're going to take away your loss of privileges because we see that you have mental illness and because you need therapy, and you need to be in groups, and you need to have opportunities. And he started, within 2 weeks, we saw a different young man. It was really amazing. So I just really wonder how many more prisoners do we have in there that are just like my son, if only they were gotten on the right medication and given the programming that they need instead of being confined. But, you know, our story went national because I was told by the Attorney General's office that they no longer use 4- and 5-point restraints here in Michigan in the prison system. Yet I knew what my son was describing was exactly that.
Wow.
And certainly, with all due respect, I'm working closely with the Michigan Department of Corrections now. They're very supportive of my program. So our story went to the Detroit Free Press. From there, it was picked up from the ACLU, Human Rights Watch nationally. And then Ted Koppel took interest in it.
MSNBC.
Because, yes, he had his own personal story. And I think often that's why people are so passionate about this work that they're doing.
Now, it's easy for us, of course, to place the blame on the prisons. But aren't the prisons basically structured and treating people the way our country wants them to be treated?
I think
we're paying through our taxes for those prisons.
Right.
And also what I'm thinking about is something you hinted at before the break. You're talking about prisons becoming places of rehabilitation. Well, we're not even near that. I mean, it's all about retribution. If you go to places like in Norway or Sweden or something like that, they see prison time not as retribution, but the punishment is for rehabilitation and restoration.
You're right.
But we are miles away from that. But the general public wants revenge and retribution. And so that's who needs to be educated, as you are doing. Am I right?
I think that certainly is a piece of it. I believe we're starting to see a little bit of shift, but we have, like you said, it's going to take a ton of work for us to get where some of the European countries are in the way that they are treating their incarcerated. And I think that they get it, and I hope that we can start using some of those as models. I am encouraged, as I've now been able to go into some of the pilot prisons where my new program is at, that I'm seeing there are some of the facilities that really are starting to grasp and understand the importance of having that programming.
Really?
I have been amazed at my ability to be able to work with these facilities. I thought it was going to be very difficult. The thing that I see is every facility is so independent. Each warden is getting to pick and choose whether or not they want to run their prison in a way that's rehabilitative.
You have to serve fiefdom, right?
Yeah, and I don't think I really understood just how deep that runs, and I'm trying to understand that. And I think that's something that the general public needs to become aware of, because these are our tax dollars. These are our prisons. And I think we have a lot of education to do so people can understand that this idea of just continually punishing is not going to bring people out in a safer manner. Our communities aren't going to be safer.
Well, that's right. And I have my own theories about that I think are pretty accurate. When you talk about a sheriff who runs his county jail system or a warden who runs the prison, again, this is something that we have done as the general public. We basically have given them absolute authority to keep these people out of sight.
Yes.
We've given them absolute authority to do almost anything they want, so that we don't have to think about those people that are incarcerated.
That's right.
You know? And so this is going to take a groundswell of people out here realizing that this is what we've done. That we're doing. I don't see the warden as the bad guy, really. He's just doing the mandate of the American people. We don't want to hear about prisoners. We don't care about mentally ill people that are behind bars or being hogtied. We don't, as long as we don't have to deal with them. Doesn't that make sense?
Yeah. I would certainly say that is where it's what my mind used to think, well, I'm safe because they're locked away.
Yep.
But I think it's really helping the general public understand that 95 to 98% of them are coming back out.
Exactly.
And when they come back out filled with anger and bitterness over how they've been treated, and they have post-traumatic stress disorder because of what they've experienced, that really can affect all of us down the road. So
absolutely. So you can even appeal to the selfish instincts in people and their own protection and their own safety by saying this is, prison time now is not making people better. It's making them worse. They're coming out and committing more serious crimes than the ones that originally got them incarcerated. After the break, we want to get back to how you are helping families to navigate through this morass. We'll be right back.
Correcting Bible study lessons is crucial to helping inmates. To partner with CBI in this safe and secure role, please visit us at cbi.fm on the web.
Welcome back to Crossroad Connection. I'm talking today with Lois DeMott, and we're having a very fascinating conversation here about prisons and access to them, but especially your organization, your ministry is about helping families navigate their way through this. Tell us more about what you are doing and how families can take advantage of this.
So I knew that I was growing very tired. I was working a full-time job and running Citizens for Prison Reform all of the other hours of my day. And I decided that I really wanted to be able to work more closely with the system because I felt like there was that gap. We were helping families, but kind of on the other side of the fence. And that I felt
separate from the system a little bit.
I felt like I really needed a deeper connection in with the system to be able to bring greater change and to be able to really assist families. So I applied for a Soros Justice grant and received that. It's an 18-month program. And so that started in May. I was awarded that, and I'm very gracious. I'm also gracious to Michigan Council Crime and Delinquency. They're my host organization. They're providing me office space. But
tell us about the program then that they're funding. What is it? You mentioned about pilot programs. How many prisons are you doing this in, and what are the contours of that pilot program? The
3 pilot sites that have been selected, and those prisons stepped up willingly and wanted to have the program. So it's at Brooks facility in Muskegon, and as well we'll follow at West Shoreline because it's the same warden. So we're starting slowly, though, implementing it. And then as well at Mid-Michigan Correctional Facility in St. Louis, Michigan.
Know that prison too? And
Macomb in Northeast Detroit. So those are the 3 pilot sites, and Brooks is kind of the lead. So the whole purpose is to teach families how to navigate, to give them the tools that are out there, because so many families don't have a clue. Some families don't even know that they can send books through approved vendors into their loved ones.
Right.
Some woman called me, "Your son had been in for 7 years," and she never knew that, and she was so excited. You thought I'd given her $1 million. So it's simple things like that. And so I have a website with all of the resources. There's
what's the name of that website?
familyparticipationprogram.com. This is.
You'd be surprised how many people sign up for our program so they get mail. Probably only 12% get mail.
You're
there,
right.
So something happens. A person gets incarcerated. People get frustrated. Family members and church members sort of move on, and they're left to languish. And so you want to keep them engaged, show them how to navigate, how to be a positive influence, and how to get through this this world which is so foreign to us. Solitary confinement, according to these countries that have ended it, is a form of torture, and it has disastrous results. It does not have rehabilitative or restorative. There may be extreme cases where a person has to be totally isolated, but it ought to be a last resort and not something that's gone to so frequently and so often.
Right, and I think on top of that is if they do have to be in solitary, this idea of continuing to punish instead of using methods of mediating and working to, I think often there's other ways that we could work with these people other than gassing them or hog tying or using like the use of force that is often utilized. Those are real things that are occurring here in the United States behind closed walls, and somehow we have to figure out how do we end those kinds of practices.
As we close, people can get involved, it sounds like, in two ways. First of all, if you have a family member or friend in prison, go to your website. It's on the screen here, and they can find resources to navigate that. But it sounds to me like you have a broader mission, that is to educate the general public in terms of what's going on so that prison reform can take place. Is that are those the two things that you're about?
Yes, and they do not have to be specifically in a pilot program to take advantage of the resources. We have advocates. I have advocates that I'm training, family-to-family advocates.
No matter what prison they're in.
No matter what prison in, we will work to try and get them connected. But the thing that we do is we don't do the work for them. We want to teach them how to do the work, and we want them to teach others how to do the work. That's how we're going to bring change. So, we're willing to help others no matter where they're at. I soon hope to launch some family workshops within the urban communities, working to bring families out who maybe have dropped off or who have had so much fear that they don't know who to ask questions to. And I'm hoping that there's a space they will feel safe coming and learning of how they can best advocate for their loved ones. But I want to have the workshops out in communities for families, and then as well do presentations within communities. I've started that through Michigan Council Crime and Delinquency and working with them, and just really educating families and the community about the need for assisting people and supporting people who are incarcerated.
Well, I believe that's how change can take place. Lois, thank you so much for being with us. I know that our viewers have learned an awful lot today about things that they probably never even thought about, and I appreciate so much that God took that experience, that awful experience, and turned it to good for the future. So thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for watching, and we hope that you'll join us again right here next week.